Welcome back. So today we will be talking a lot about other areas of practice within OT, but we're going to dive right into that after we talk about what tea we're drinking. So Dr. Eng, what are you drinking today?
I just have a regular English breakfast black tea. What about you?
Today I'm drinking, okay, it's a berry hibiscus with a dehydrated lemon slice.
Wow.
We're just
It
getting
does it make a
fancy.
difference if the lemon is dehydrated?
You know what? I never really thought about that. I just always see it all over the internet and it just looks pretty, so I like the dehydrated slices.
Did you dehydrate it yourself?
I did not. So this one actually came with the packet and I was like, you know what? Might as well, two in one.
Okay, cool.
All right. For our first question of the day, we are going to ask, when is it a good time to start a private practice? Do I need a certain number of years of experience?
So I think the best time to start is now or as soon as possible. And that's not very popular opinion. I think most will probably tell you to gain that experience first because you should develop your clinical reasoning skills or add certification, get some legitimacy under your belt, etc. And I think all of that makes perfect sense and that's fair. But that doesn't mean you can't start. There's a huge difference between starting and growing and starting and scaling. You may not be able to scale until later, but I honestly believe the best time to start is now when you have fewer clients and you have more time because you need to build a strong business foundation. So, for example, if you're going to start an S corporation or you're going to start an LLC or be a sole proprietor, there's a bunch of rules and regulations you have to follow. You have to figure things out with your taxes, your documentation system, insurance, liability, and so many more things that you probably never thought about, and many more things that will come up when you go through the process. So it will be, I think, in my opinion, just a lot more manageable if you have fewer clients today or even zero clients today in year one. And as you go through the learning phase, you'll see the business side of things and what you need, what you don't need, what you might need to change. And at that point, you have some flexibility to pivot. So just, I mean, imagine yourself waiting 5 to 10 years. Sure, you're going to have more clinical experience, but your business experience and your business systems are probably underdeveloped. And if the issue and any issues come up with your business, it will be much more difficult to address when you're starting to grow and learn and put the pieces together at the same time. So my recommendation, start now, or at least start learning now, and you can start putting systems into place.
Some very useful tips and tricks there about starting our businesses. And with the age of growing social media presence, I feel like that's also propelling a lot of newer OTs to begin their practice through that as well.
For sure.
All right. And moving on to question number two, can I start my own private practice while working at the same time?
Yes, please do. My recommendation, that's always the case because until you start making money or until you're sustainable, I don't want to sound mean, but it's technically a hobby, like that's what accountants, that's what the IRS will tell you. If you're not making money, it's a hobby and it can be a very expensive hobby. So I don't recommend quitting your job or going all in on a private practice, at least not yet, because you probably need some capital. You probably need to work at the same time in order to support yourself, in order to learn. So hopefully that job that you're in teaches you things that you'll need to know about running your practice. So my recommendation is work at the same time, but also aim for some of those senior or management positions or a position that will expose you to the non-clinical side of therapy so you become familiar with the things that I mentioned related to insurance or payments, reimbursement, referral sources, even things like maintaining medical records and being HIPAA compliant. All those things has a pretty steep learning curve, and you want to make sure that you're exposed to that. That doesn't mean you work two jobs forever, or that you work a job that you hate, or you work a job that has no relevance to you. It means that you need to acquire these skills. Hopefully, you're getting paid for it, and it means that you need to hit that point of sustainability first before you can move on to your private practice, at least full time.
Right. And so for the next question, this brings up another great one. So what are some niche areas that OTs can work in?
I think there are a lot. What do you think, Lisa? Like, what are some areas that you've seen?
I've actually met quite a few people who have done women's health in particular. So they'll focus on pelvic floor health. There's also a lot of consultation opportunities for OTs. And then, even in the realm of esports, actually, there are some that specialize in doing hand evaluations. So, if you have a background in hand therapy, that might be something for you as well. And there's also a growing mentorship sphere, I guess you can say. There's a lot of OTs that are extending mentorship services or providing mentorship communities that they're building. And then there's also engineering and design. So there are a ton of adaptive wear. For example, I just stumbled upon intimate wear that was created and started by an OT. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. I never really thought that this was something that OTs can dive into. So that's also there for OTs. And then being a representative for a tech company. So being able to lend your clinical eye and your occupational therapy background for some of these tech companies who might want to aim for rehab specific innovations. So that's something to also think about as well. There's a ton of different areas that people don't really know about or talk about for OTs.
Yeah, sounds like it. Like a lot of different emerging areas that you mentioned there. Other things that I can think of are things like animal assisted therapy, for example, equine therapy, where you get a chance to work with horses and whatnot. Aquatic therapy, also very popular these days. Ocean therapy, which was pioneered by an amazing OT, Carly Rogers, who's worked with veterans with PTSD, getting them to surf out in the beach, which I think is just amazing. So some of those emerging areas, other non-traditional settings, as you mentioned, I my suggestion is look in the community, like see if there's a need there. There might be opportunities to work with teenagers who have gotten pregnant, maybe the homeless youth population. There's so many different things. In the future, we'll probably have another podcast on entrepreneurship, and I'll talk about some of the projects that I've been involved with that are non-traditional as well. So I think there's a lot to discuss there.
Yeah, looking forward to those next episodes. I feel like there's going to be so many different avenues for OT to kind of extend into. Question number 4. This is actually a really good one since we were talking a lot about working your private practice, working your side projects, and all of this. So the question is, how do you manage a work-life balance?
I don't really, so I'm gonna defer this question to you because you're probably the better person to answer this. But how do you manage your work-life balance? Because I know you do a lot as well. Like you work with the Neurospecialist Institute as part of your capstone. You're also doing your own like actual work employment, and you're a full-time student. So how do you manage this?
So that's a really great question. It took a while to refine it, but I feel like the moment I found the tools that really worked for me, that's when I started to find that, okay, this is my routine. This is my groove per se. So I usually use time blocking and I have to have visuals. So I rely so much on Google Calendar. And I link that along with my iPhone calendar. So there's no escaping. If I have something on the calendar, it's there. So that's how I would typically manage. And then usually, and that even includes blocking off some self-care time, whether it's just at least 15 minutes or 30 minutes. I will use the full 15 or 30 minutes that I have. And then aside from that, yeah, as long as you incorporate some sort of hour to yourself, I think that's what's really important as well. But other than that, when you're on the grind, as long as you have your calendar with you, I feel like that's the best way to go about it. And if that means separating your calendar, like, for example, purple is my favorite color, so I usually use that for my personal events. And then if I have work, I have that in orange. And then anything related to school or the Neurospecialist Institute, I have it in a nice green color. So that's how I operate throughout the week as well.
Got it. I like how you color code things, and I like how the Neurospecialist Institute is green. That's awesome.
I like that color. It's a calming color.
You know, blue is our logo. It should probably be bluish.
See, I thought about that, but that's like the basic Google color, so I was like, "Nah, we'll do green."
Okay. I'll offer a different perspective on balance and whatnot. I think balance is so subjective, and I think a lot, especially if you see on social media these days, like people are getting out of balance because they're trying to get in balance. I think there were moments in my life where I would work all the time, like had multiple jobs, but I never felt out of balance because I enjoyed what I did. So again, I think it's completely subjective. I think it's also seasonal, and it's something that you shouldn't put too much pressure on yourself because otherwise, again, you're gonna fall out of balance. So, I mean, imagine you're planning a wedding and there are just times that you're not going to be able to get much sleep or see friends or partake in your traditional routine because you're trying to do this wedding planning and it's taking up a lot of your time, but you're going to go back to balance after the wedding, hopefully. Or imagine you just had a baby and yes, like I would love to go to the gym or read a book or hang out with friends, but my priority is to keep this human being alive. So in that season, I'm barely getting enough sleep. So in those moments, I'm going to say, "F- going to the gym, like I got to sleep, you know?" So
Yeah.
balance, again, is completely subjective.
That's actually a really good point you brought up there because there are some people who see my schedule and think, how do you do all of that? How is that even possible? But to me, I feel like, oh, that's my normal. So I really like that you brought that up because it's like you said, it's very subjective and some people might need more than an hour or more than 15 to 30 minutes of self-care, right? So really interesting point there. Okay, so that brings us to the next question. Has there ever been a day where you wanted to change your career? If you weren't an OT, what would you do?
Well, to answer the first question, has there ever been a day where I wanted to change my career? The answer to that is yes, honestly speaking. And I think with that being said, I wasn't looking for a career change, but I might have been looking for a job change. So the good thing about that is, OT is so wonderful and so versatile. So even if I wanted to change jobs, I never really changed what I was doing. I always did OT. And that's what I tell people. You don't have to love your job, but you should love your work. And maybe you don't love your employer or the system or politics or whatever else it is that you're going through in that moment. But in those moments when you're not in your job, but when you're working, when you're actually immersed in your craft and you're doing the things that no one else can do, or you're doing the things that really bring you joy, those are the moments to cherish and those are the moments to love. So, in terms of a career change, I don't think I've ever wanted to stop being an OT. I just wanted to do things that were different. And that's when I started launching, my private practices or my side projects, et cetera. It was still very much OT related, but it wasn't tied to just one single employer. What about you, Risa? Like if you weren't in OT, or is there some other career that you might want to do?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I actually have always been into makeup, doing hair, skincare, all of that. So part of me was actually considering going into like esthetician work, and even beauty school I considered, but I feel like my heart is fully immersed in OT. I mean, if even if it means creating like an adaptive device related to be like self-care, like beauty or like applying makeup or things like that, then that would be awesome to combine. But honestly, I that's probably one of the other routes that I would have taken if I didn't decide on going into OT.
Gotcha. And I think it's still very much related to OT because you can still do some of those things with your clients, right? Like doing self-care and but like not just at the very basic level, but really get immersed in that and really do their hair and makeup in ways that they probably never would have thought about.
Yeah, I actually want to share an experience. One of my aunts, she was in the hospital and she was seeing an OT, and the OT did something that I thought was so wonderful and it helped raise my aunt's spirits. She actually did her hair for her before the session started, and it made her so much more engaged in the session. It made her so excited to be around other people. And so I think it's just those little tiny things that you can incorporate into the practice that makes a huge difference for the clients.
Very cool. Going to that second question, if I weren't in OT, what would you do? I think I always tell people that I go into real estate just because like you see all those TikTok videos where people are just like going after passive incomes and all these properties and whatnot. Probably much harder than people realize. But it looks really glamorous, like just making all that money, etc. But I think where my true passion would be, like if I could choose anything in the world, it might be a Michelin star inspector and reviewer. Like I would love to just go and travel and try out all these restaurants and write about them, anonymously. So that would be my dream job.
That sounds awesome. I never knew that was an actual like designated job.
It's a thing, but you have to have experience in the food service industry or in hospitality or anything related to that, which I don't have a background in, but one of these days I think that's a life goal of mine.
Well, hopefully you get that position and you get to try all the fancy foods out there and then let us know how it is. All right, thank you again for tuning in, everybody. If you have any questions that you want answered or if you have insights to share with us, please use the email that we have linked here. For the next episode, we are going to be having a discussion with a fellow student, and we're going to get some insight on the student experience in grad school and how they are navigating that. Hope you join us for the next episode. Thank you again, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. And I just want to say, email us your tough questions. If there's something that you've always wanted to know about from the perspective of your instructor or professor, your clinical instructor at fieldwork, or your professor in the program, let us know. We're happy to address them. Nothing is off limits. So we hope to see your questions. Thank you.